Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be addressing some of the recent events surrounding the family YouTuber Myka Stauffer and her husband and their recent decision to rehome the child that they adopted from China. This is a story that I've been following very closely since it broke out a couple of weeks ago. For the purposes of this video, I'm really looking at this from a perspective of someone who has been adopted myself, as well as being someone who is in the child development field. As I've been following this story and learning a little bit more through commentary channels on YouTube, I didn't see a whole lot of reactions from people who have been adopted themselves. Now for me, both as a mother and as someone who has been adopted, this story definitely was a trigger for me. And I definitely went back and forth in terms of whether or not I even wanted to make this video, but I just felt that it would be something that would be important for someone who has been adopted to maybe be able to hear my story, to sort of hear my perspective and be able to potentially relate to it. So for those of you who might not be familiar with this story, there is a YouTuber and her husband who just recently announced that they have rehomed their child who they adopted from China a couple of years ago. Now it is very hard for me to hear the term rehoming as it relates to a child. That's just something that I feel that you would do for a puppy or a kitten, definitely not for a child. So going forward in this video, I'm really just going to be referring to it as this child being placed in a new home. And the reason that this couple gave for placing this child into someone else's care was that he had special needs that were above and beyond what they were able to provide for. So that's just a little bit of the backstory. Now, as this relates to me, as I mentioned, I am adopted. I was adopted internationally when I was 9 months old, so I did come over to the United States when I was 9 months old and placed with my adoptive parents. This child, when he was adopted, he was maybe a year and a half, 2 years old, and just recently when he was placed in his new home, he had been with this family for about 2 to 3 years. Now for me, being adopted at 9 months old, I definitely don't have any recollection or any memory of the people who took care of me prior to my being placed with my adopted parents. Regardless of whether they were my biological parents or whether they were foster parents, I don't have any recollection of them. But for this child, because he was placed with this adoptive family at a little bit of a later age, he does have those memories of those people who did take care of him prior to him being placed with his adoptive parents. So just starting out, he's coming into this situation with this new family with some anxiety, with some separation issues, just having to deal with, being taken away from the people who had been taking care of him up till that point in time. So right there's already some challenges that this child is facing going into this new adoptive family. And then let's just add on to that this child has special needs. So that just means that it's going to take him that much longer to be able to acclimate to this new adoptive family and get used to the new routine, get used to the new siblings that are in the household. I believe that this couple already had maybe about 4 children prior to adopting this child. The other thing to consider in thinking about how this child has already gone through several homes since birth is that there's the potential for this child to experience some really traumatic feelings of lack of self-esteem, lack of self-worth, lack of just identity and belonging. I know for me personally, I didn't think about these things so much as I was growing up. But as I'm getting older and I have my own children, I definitely think every now and then about my own adoption story and why wasn't I wanted and what was it about me that my biological parents didn't want. Feelings of insecurity, lack of self-esteem. If you were given up for adoption, you might think that, that means that maybe there's something wrong with me. And, maybe I wasn't wanted, maybe I wasn't worthy. I will say that I am definitely thankful that I was adopted. I feel that my adoptive parents met my basic needs. I mean, I had food, I had shelter, I had clothing. So, in that regard, I do feel fortunate, but I still wonder. It's still a feeling of loss. It still brings up feelings of grief. And I think for me, it's just the piece of not knowing. For me, unfortunately, I don't have record of who my biological parents are. And so that's always going to be something that is going to make me wonder, is going to make me curious, is going to make me just kind of wanting to know more. And unfortunately, those are just answers that I don't have, at least not right now. So given all of that, given that at times I do feel a sense of loss, I do feel grief, I do feel a lack of self-esteem, it just makes me wonder, if I am feeling these things and I had a pretty stable family environment in terms of this is my adoptive mom, this is my adoptive dad. From the time that I was adopted, I didn't bounce around in homes. I can't even imagine what it must be like for this child to have this experience of being with his biological parents from birth, or being even shifted into a foster home from birth, and then going to this adoptive home only to a couple of years later be placed in someone else's care. That's just something that I feel really heartbroken for this child for. The fact that he has had the last couple of years with this family who he thought loved him, who he had formed a relationship with. He had built relationships with the parents, with the siblings, and now they're not there anymore. Now he has to start all over. And again, a typically developing child is going to have some trouble with a situation like that. But then adding on to that, the fact that this child has special needs is just going to be so much more detrimental to his health and development. At the end of the day, my best interest is always going to be with the child and just hoping for the best possible outcome that that child deserves. And for this child, I just really hope that he is now with a family who is going to love him unconditionally, who is going to be able to meet his needs, and who is going to be able to raise him into adulthood. And I also just hope that this family is going to be able to articulate to him that he is loved, that he is wanted, and that they have done everything in their power to give him all of the supports that he needs so that he can be a thriving individual. I really just hope for nothing but the best for this child. So that is it. That is my perspective around this story and just sort of how I've been feeling lately in regards to this child. As I mentioned, this is a story that has just triggered me as someone who has been adopted and as someone who is an advocate for children and their rights. So it was definitely something that I felt that I needed to respond to. And I'm also just hoping that this perspective can be helpful to someone else who also has been adopted, or who potentially is looking into adoption or has children of their own who they have adopted themselves. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch. This is definitely not the type of content that I normally put on my channel. So if you're interested to see some of the other types of videos that I have here on my channel, I'll go ahead and leave a link to a playlist right here. If you're not already subscribed, I would love it if you would consider doing so. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.